ChatGPT on theories of property. Please outline the historical development of the concept of property. The concept of property has a long and complex history that has evolved over time and across cultures. In ancient civilizations, property was often seen as a communal resource and was subject to various forms of collective ownership and usage. For example, in ancient Rome, the concept of private property was recognized but was subject to certain limitations, such as the right of the state to confiscate land for public use. Medieval Europe saw the development of feudalism, where land was held by lords and tenants owed obligations to their lords in exchange for the use of the land. During this time, the idea of private property rights began to emerge. The modern concept of property rights as we understand them today, including the right to own, use, and transfer property, took shape during the Enlightenment period in Europe and North America. This period saw the emergence of individualism, capitalism, and the idea that individuals should be free to own and control their own property. In the 19th and 20th centuries, various legal and political systems codified the concept of property rights and protected them through laws and constitutions. This process has continued in the present day, with ongoing debates about the nature and limits of property rights, particularly with regards to intellectual property, natural resources, and other forms of property. Overall, the concept of property has undergone significant changes throughout history, reflecting the changing values and priorities of different societies and cultures. Perhaps ancient civilizations valued property for the same reason we do today, for survival and advantage, and communities protected their resources communally. What can you tell me about the explicit or implicit conceptual theories of legal property in ancient civilizations? In ancient civilizations, property was often seen as a communal resource and was subject to various forms of collective ownership and usage. However, there were also explicit or implicit conceptual theories of legal property that varied across cultures. In ancient Greece, for example, property was seen as a means of ensuring individual and household self-sufficiency. The idea of property was closely linked to the concept of citizenship and the ability to participate in the political life of the city-state. In ancient Rome, the concept of private property was recognized but was subject to certain limitations, such as the right of the state to confiscate land for public use. Roman law also recognized the idea of usufruct, which allowed individuals to use and profit from property belonging to someone else, as long as they did not damage it. In ancient China, the concept of property was linked to the idea of the emperor as the ultimate owner of all land. Individual ownership of land was allowed, but it was always subject to the authority of the emperor and could be taken back by the state. In ancient India, property was often seen as a source of family honor and was passed down through generations. Hindu law recognized the idea of individual property rights, but also placed limits on the transfer and inheritance of property in order to maintain social stability. These are just a few examples of the diverse and complex views of property in ancient civilizations. Overall, ancient societies often had implicit or explicit conceptual theories of property that reflected their cultural values, political systems, and economic needs. Can you give realistic short stories of ancient India limiting property transfer or inheritance, the Chinese emperor taking back property, the Roman state confiscating land, and lack of citizen participation limiting private property in ancient Greece? Sure. Here are some short examples to illustrate the different ways that ancient civilizations limited property transfer, inheritance, and private property. Ancient India. In ancient India, Hindu law placed limits on the transfer and inheritance of property in order to maintain social stability. For example, if a wealthy man were to transfer all of his property to one of his children, this could cause conflict and division within the family. To prevent this, Hindu law placed restrictions on the amount of property that could be transferred or inherited by an individual. Ancient China. In ancient China, the emperor was seen as the ultimate owner of all land. This meant that the state had the right to take back property if it was deemed necessary. For example, if a wealthy landowner were to accumulate too much land, the emperor might confiscate some of it and redistribute it to other citizens. Ancient Rome. In ancient Rome, the state had the right to confiscate land for public use. This meant that individuals who owned property were not always secure in their ownership, as the state could take it away if necessary. For example, if the city needed to build a new road or public building, the state might confiscate land from nearby property owners. Ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, the idea of property was closely linked to the concept of citizenship and the ability to participate in the political life of the city-state. If an individual did not have property, they were not considered a full citizen and did not have the right to participate in politics. This meant that those without property were limited in their ability to own and control their own property. Additionally, property was seen as a means of ensuring individual and household self-sufficiency, so owning enough property to support oneself was considered important. These are just a few examples of how ancient civilizations limited property transfer, inheritance, and private property in different ways. Each society had its own unique values and priorities, which shaped its views on property and the role it played in society. How did the idea of private property emerge with feudalism? What is feudalism and feudalistic private property, and how did people conceptualize or define property? Feudalism was a social, economic, and political system that dominated Europe during the Middle Ages from the 9th to the 15th centuries. In feudalism, land was held by lords, nobles, and tenants. Peasants owed obligations to their lords in exchange for the use of the land. The lords had the right to control the land and collect taxes and other payments from the tenants who lived on it. The idea of private property emerged during feudalism as lords began to assert their ownership rights over the land and other resources they controlled. This was a significant change from earlier systems where land was often seen as a communal resource subject to collective ownership and usage. In feudalism, lords had the right to use their land as they saw fit and to transfer or sell it to other lords. They also had the right to control the labor and resources of the tenants who lived on the land. Over time, this idea of private property became more widespread, and lords and tenants alike began to see property as a valuable asset that could be bought, sold, and traded. The concept of property during feudalism was closely tied to the idea of lordship. Property was seen as a means of exerting power and control over others, and ownership was closely linked to political and economic status. The lords who controlled large estates were considered the most powerful and influential members of society, and the ability to own and control property was considered a mark of status and wealth. Overall, the idea of private property emerged during feudalism as lords asserted their ownership rights over the land and resources they controlled. This marked a significant shift from earlier systems where land was often seen as a communal resource and was subject to various forms of collective ownership and usage. Suppose a community in an ancient civilization and a feudal lord had equal interests in keeping certain land, gold, or food to themselves. In that case, please tell me more about the significance of this concept of exerting control over property, comparing an example from an ancient civilization and that of a feudal lord. The significance of exerting control over property in both ancient civilizations and feudal societies was rooted in the desire to maintain stability and security. In both cases, property was seen as a valuable resource that could be used to secure wealth, power, and status. In ancient civilizations, control over property often served as a means of ensuring the survival and well-being of the community. For example, in ancient Mesopotamia, land was seen as a communal resource, and access to it was controlled through a complex system of laws and customs. This helped to ensure that everyone in the community had access to the resources they needed to live and thrive, and it prevented any one individual from acquiring too much power or wealth. In feudal societies, lords exerted control over property in order to maintain their power and influence over their tenants. Feudal lords held legal ownership rights over the land and other resources they controlled, and they used this control to extract labor, resources, and taxes from their tenants. This helped to secure their wealth and power, and it also helped to maintain order and stability in the feudal system by ensuring that everyone had a clear place in the social hierarchy. Overall, the concept of exerting control over property was significant in both ancient civilizations and feudal societies because it helped to ensure the stability and security of the community. In both cases, property was seen as a valuable resource that could be used to secure wealth, power, and status. And control over property was a means of maintaining order and stability in the face of competing interests and demands. Please tell me more about feudal tenant obligations, feudal esteem, and the developing concept of private property in feudal systems. In feudal systems, tenants owed a number of obligations to their lords in exchange for the use of the land. These obligations typically included paying rent, providing labor on the lord's estate, and providing military service in times of war. These obligations were seen as necessary for maintaining order and stability in the feudal system, and they helped to ensure that lords had the resources and support they needed to protect their estates and maintain their power. Feudal esteem was a concept that reflected the social, political, and economic status of individuals in feudal society. Esteem was closely tied to land ownership, and lords and tenants were ranked according to the size and wealth of their estates. The more land an individual owned, the higher their esteem, and the more influence they had in the feudal system. The concept of private property developed gradually in feudal systems as lords asserted their ownership rights over the land and other resources they controlled. This marked a significant shift from earlier systems where land was often seen as a communal resource subject to collective ownership and usage. In feudalism, lords had the right to use their land as they saw fit and to transfer or sell it to other lords, and they also had the right to control the labor and resources of the tenants who lived on the land. Over time, the idea of private property became more widespread, and lords and tenants alike began to see property as a valuable asset that could be bought, sold, and traded. Overall, feudal tenant obligations, feudal esteem, and the developing concept of private property in feudal systems were all closely intertwined. The obligations that tenants owed to their lords helped to maintain order and stability in the feudal system, and the concept of feudal esteem reflected the social, political, and economic status of individuals in feudal society. The development of private property marked a significant shift from earlier systems where land was seen as a communal resource, and it helped to secure the wealth and power of lords in the feudal system. Tell me a fictional and symbolic story about the moment capitalism emerged, and then tell me what capitalism is, then explain capitalism in a way a 12-year-old could understand. Once upon a time, there was a small village where people traded goods and services with each other in order to meet their needs. One day, a man named Adam realized that he could make more money by buying low and selling high. He started trading goods between different villages, and as he became more successful, others in the village began to emulate his methods. Soon, the village became a bustling market where people bought and sold goods from each other in order to make a profit. This new system of exchange became known as capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system in which individuals are free to buy and sell goods and services in a marketplace. The prices of goods and services are determined by supply and demand, and individuals are free to compete with each other in order to make a profit. Imagine that you have a lemonade stand, and you want to make money by selling lemonade to your friends and neighbors. Capitalism would mean that you are free to set your own price for the lemonade based on what you think people are willing to pay. If someone else starts selling lemonade down the street for a cheaper price, you might have to lower your price in order to compete. The person who makes the most money is the one who is able to sell their lemonade for the most amount of money. This is capitalism in action. Please explain John Locke's theory of property ownership. John Locke was an English philosopher who lived in the 17th century. He is best known for his theories on government, natural rights, and property. In his second treatise of government, Locke argued that individuals have the natural right to own property. According to Locke, individuals own their own bodies and the fruits of their labor. When individuals mix their labor with natural resources, such as land, they transform those resources into something useful, and as a result, they have a right to own the property they have created. In other words, according to Locke, property ownership is justified by the effort and labor that individuals put into transforming raw materials into something of value. Locke also believed that the purpose of government is to protect the natural rights of individuals, including the right to own property. However, if the government fails to protect these rights, individuals have the right to overthrow the government and establish a new one that will protect their rights. Overall, Locke's theory of property ownership is rooted in the idea that individuals have natural rights, including the right to own property, and that the purpose of government is to protect these rights. Property ownership is justified by the effort and labor that individuals put into transforming raw materials into something of value. What other theories of property ownership emerged in the context of capitalism? In the context of capitalism, there were several theories of property ownership that emerged in addition to John Locke's theory. Some of these include utilitarianism is an economic philosophy that emphasizes the greatest good for the greatest number of people. According to this theory, property ownership is justified if it leads to the greatest overall happiness for society. Social contract theory. This theory suggests that property ownership is based on an implicit agreement between individuals and the government. The government has a duty to protect individuals' property rights, and in return, individuals must follow the laws and regulations established by the government. Mercantilism is an economic theory that emphasizes the accumulation of wealth by a nation, particularly through trade. According to this theory, property ownership is justified because it leads to the accumulation of wealth, which benefits both the individual and the nation. Marxism. Marxist theory critiques capitalism and argues that property ownership is unjust because it leads to the exploitation of the working class. According to Marx, the ownership of the means of production by a small group of capitalists leads to the exploitation of the workers, who do not receive a fair share of the profits generated by their labor. Overall, there are many different theories of property ownership that have emerged in the context of capitalism, each with its own unique perspective on the justification for property ownership and the role of the government in protecting property rights. Can you give a short scenario of each of these capitalistic theories translating into practice? Sure, here are short scenarios that illustrate each of the capitalistic theories of property ownership in practice. Utilitarianism. Suppose a large corporation wants to build a factory in a small town. According to utilitarianism, the government should allow the corporation to build the factory if it can be demonstrated that this will lead to the greatest overall happiness for society. For example, the corporation might argue that the factory will create jobs, increase economic growth, and raise the standard of living in the town. Social contract theory. Suppose an individual buys a house, and the government grants them a property title. According to social contract theory, the individual has a right to own the property as long as they follow the laws and regulations established by the government. For example, the government might require the individual to pay property taxes, comply with building codes, and respect their neighbor's property rights. Mercantilism. Suppose a wealthy individual invests in a shipping company that exports goods to other countries. According to mercantilism, the individual's property ownership is justified because it leads to the accumulation of wealth, which benefits both the individual and the nation. For example, the shipping company might generate profits that the individual can use to buy more property or invest in other businesses while also creating jobs and boosting economic growth. Marxism. Suppose a group of workers are employed by a factory that produces consumer goods. According to Marxism, the factory owner's property ownership is unjust because it leads to the exploitation of the workers. For example, the workers might receive low wages, work in dangerous or unhealthy conditions, and have limited rights and freedoms, while the factory owners receive the lion's share of the profits generated by the workers' labor. These are just examples, but they illustrate how different theories of property ownership can translate into practice in a capitalist context. Can you outline some 19th and 20th century legal and constitutional theories of property ownership? Yes, here are some of the most influential legal and constitutional theories of property ownership in the 19th and 20th centuries. Natural rights theory. Property ownership is a natural right derived from natural law, which is said to exist prior to the state and is protected by the Constitution. Labor theory. Property ownership is a result of an individual's labor and investment in the property. This theory was popularized by John Locke. Socialist theory. Property ownership is a social construct that is controlled and regulated by the state for the common good. This theory was popularized by Karl Marx. Eminent domain. The government has the power of eminent domain, which means that it can seize private property for public use as long as compensation is paid to the property owner. Regulatory takings. The government can regulate the use of private property, but must compensate the property owner if the regulation results in a significant economic burden. Public trust doctrine. Certain resources, such as waterways, are held in trust by the state for the use and benefit of the public. Neighborhood property theory. Property ownership is a product of the community and is subject to community control and regulation. These are just some of the main legal and constitutional theories of property ownership that have influenced property law in the 19th and 20th centuries. Can you explain the bundle of rights theory of property and contradistinguish it from some other theories? Yes, the bundle of rights theory of property is a legal theory that views property ownership as consisting of a bundle of rights, such as the right to use, occupy, transfer, exclude others, and dispose of the property. This theory views property ownership as a collection of rights rather than a single, indivisible right. This theory contrasts with other theories, such as the natural rights theory, which views property ownership as a natural right derived from natural law and protected by the Constitution. In this view, property ownership is a single, indivisible right that cannot be divided or regulated by the state. The bundle of rights theory also differs from the labor theory, which views property ownership as a result of an individual's labor and investment in the property. In this view, property ownership is a reward for an individual's hard work and is a protected right under the law. Finally, the bundle of rights theory contrasts with the socialist theory, which views property ownership as a social construct that is controlled and regulated by the state for the common good. In this view, property ownership is not a protected individual right, but rather a privilege granted by the state. In summary, the bundle of rights theory views property ownership as a collection of rights that can be divided, regulated, and restricted by the state, while other theories, such as the natural rights theory and the labor theory, view property ownership as a single, protected right. Can you explain some appeals and drawbacks of eminent domain and natural rights theories? Eminent domain theory. Appeal. The eminent domain theory holds that the state has the power to take over private property for public use, such as building roads, bridges, or schools. This allows for the government to carry out important public projects that might otherwise be hindered by private ownership. Drawbacks. One major drawback is that the state can abuse this power, taking private property for purposes that do not serve the public good or for the benefit of private individuals. This can result in the forced eviction of people from their homes and businesses, which can cause significant harm and financial loss. Additionally, compensation offered for taken property may not always be adequate. Natural rights theory. Appeal. The natural rights theory of property holds that individuals have the right to own and control property because it is a natural right, rooted in their ability to use and control their own bodies and labor. This theory provides a strong justification for the protection of property rights and is often used to argue against government intervention in property ownership. Drawbacks. One drawback of this theory is that it can be used to justify unequal distributions of property, as some individuals may have acquired more property through their own efforts or through inheritance. This can result in significant disparities in wealth and property ownership and can undermine social and economic equality. Additionally, the natural rights theory may not always be able to account for the need for government intervention in the use and control of property in order to protect the rights of others and promote the public good. Which three modern theory of property are most useful for understanding property given the economic impacts that language models like yourself will probably affect in the world, and why? Given the potential economic impacts of language models like myself, the following three modern theories of property may be particularly useful for understanding property. Commons-based peer production. This theory views property as a shared resource that is created and managed through the collective efforts of a community. As language models and AI become more integrated into the economy, this theory can help to understand how property is created and managed in a decentralized, collaborative manner. Information property. This theory views property as a set of rights and obligations associated with information and data, rather than physical goods. With the increasing value and importance of data and information in the digital economy, this theory can help to understand how property rights and obligations are evolving in the digital age. Public goods. This theory views property as a set of resources that are collectively owned and managed for the benefit of society. As language models and AI become more important in the economy, This theory can help to understand how property is being used to serve the public good and how the benefits of these resources are being distributed. Each of these theories provides a unique perspective on property and can help to understand how property is being affected by the increasing role of language models and AI in the economy. By taking a multidisciplinary approach that incorporates these different theories, it may be possible to gain a more complete and nuanced understanding of property in the digital age. How do the public trust doctrine of property and neighborhood property theories relate to commons-based peer production and public goods theories of property? The public trust doctrine and neighborhood property theories are related to the commons-based peer production and public goods theories of property in that they all address the role of the state in managing and protecting resources for the benefit of society. Public trust doctrine. This theory holds that certain natural resources, such as bodies of water and wildlife, are held in trust by the state for the benefit of the public. This doctrine recognizes the importance of preserving and protecting these resources for future generations and can be seen as a form of public ownership. Neighborhood property theories. These theories focus on the role of communities in managing and protecting resources. Neighborhood property theories hold that communities have a responsibility to maintain and protect resources for the benefit of the community and future generations. Commons-based peer production. This theory views property as a shared resource that is created and managed through the collective efforts of a community. It recognizes the importance of collective ownership and management in ensuring the preservation and protection of resources for future generations. Public goods. This theory views property as a set of resources that are collectively owned and managed for the benefit of society. It recognizes the role of the state in ensuring that these resources are used in a way that serves the public good and are available to all members of society. In each of these theories, the state has a responsibility to manage and protect resources for the benefit of society. The public trust doctrine and neighborhood property theories focus on the role of the state in preserving and protecting resources, while commons-based peer production and public goods theories focus on the role of communities and the public in managing and protecting these resources. These theories complement each other in that they recognize the importance of collective management and protection of resources for the benefit of society. Can you give me a riddle, a parable, and a few catchphrases to convey theories of property that will be especially useful in the context of emerging artificial linguistic models in the world? Sure. Here are a riddle, a parable, and catchphrases to convey theories of property in the context of emerging artificial linguistic models. Riddle: I am created through collaboration, but who really owns me? Am I owned by a single entity, or do I belong to all who contributed to my creation? Parable: Once upon a time, there was a vast field of ideas and knowledge. Some people tried to fence it off and claim it as their own, but others saw the value of working together to cultivate and harvest the field. They agreed to share the crops and work together to maintain the field for future generations. Catchphrases: Data is a shared resource, not a commodity. AI belongs to the community, not just the creators. Sharing is the future of ownership. Collaboration is the key to managing AI property. These riddles, parables, and catchphrases can help to convey the idea that property rights in the context of emerging AI and linguistic models may be shifting away from traditional concepts of ownership and towards collective management and sharing. They emphasize the importance of collaboration and community in shaping the future of property in the digital age. Postscript: I also asked this question when I forgot to mention property. What 3 modern theories are probably most useful in the next 20 years, given the likely effects that artificial intelligences will have on resources and what people value? It is difficult to predict with certainty which theories will be most useful in the next 20 years, given the rapidly changing nature of technology and the potential impact of artificial intelligence (AI). However, the following 3 modern theories may be particularly relevant in this context. Human-centered AI. This theory emphasizes the importance of designing AI systems that are aligned with human values and that prioritize the well-being of individuals and society. As AI continues to be integrated into more aspects of our lives, it is essential to ensure that it is used in ways that benefit people and do not undermine their rights or autonomy. Resource allocation and accessibility. With the increasing adoption of AI, it is likely that the demand for certain resources will change and some resources may become scarcer. A theory that considers the ethical and fair allocation of resources, particularly in the context of AI, will become increasingly important. Environmental sustainability. As AI continues to expand and consume resources, it is essential to consider its impact on the environment. A theory that focuses on the development of sustainable and environmentally friendly AI systems will be critical in ensuring that AI is used in a responsible and sustainable manner. These 3 theories are interrelated and will likely play an important role in shaping the future of AI and how it is used in society.